The casket gleamed under the funeral home's harsh fluorescent lights, and I couldn't help but think Grandma would have hated the cheap bronze finish. She always said, if you're going to do something, do it right or don't do it at all. Too bad her advice never extended to choosing which family members deserved her inheritance. I adjusted my discount department store tie and tried to look appropriately mournful. Truth was, I'd missed the old bat. She was the only one in the family who never looked at me like I was a walking disappointment. Unlike everyone else in this room, she never measured my worth by my bank account balance. That's when I saw them walk in. My cousin Derek strutted through the door like he owned the place, which, given his net worth, he probably could have. 6'2", silver hair, perfectly styled, wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly salary. And hanging on his arm like a designer accessory was Rebecca Martinez, the woman who 5 years ago had been planning to marry me. My stomach dropped to somewhere around my shoes. Rebecca looked exactly like the woman I'd fallen in love with, except now she wore diamonds that caught the light every time she moved. Her black dress was elegant, expensive, everything I could never have afforded to buy her. She scanned the room with those green eyes I used to get lost in, and when they landed on me, her perfectly glossed lips curved into a smile that made my spine go cold. She whispered something to Derek, and they both looked my way. Then she did something that made every muscle in my body tense. She walked over. "Alex Rourke," she said, her voice honey-sweet with just a hint of venom. "I was hoping you'd be here." "Rebecca." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Derek." My cousin gave me that condescending smile he'd perfected in childhood. "Sorry for your loss, Alex. Grandma was a real character." "She was." I kept my responses short. Experience had taught me that engaging with Derek only led to humiliation. Rebecca stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. She glanced around to make sure we had some privacy, then leaned in and whispered, "Guess I made the right choice 5 years ago? I heard from Derek you're down to your last $37.30. The heat rushed to my face. That information could only have come from one source, my wife Marta, who apparently had been sharing our financial struggles with Derek. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. But I'd learned something important in my 41 years on this planet. Sometimes the best response to cruelty is calm precision. I looked Rebecca directly in the eyes and said, "At least I don't have to sleep next to someone who counts my worth in dollar signs. Must get cold at night knowing you're just the most expensive thing Derek owns." Her smile faltered for just a second, but it was enough. Derek's face darkened. "Watch yourself, Alex," Derek said, stepping closer. "Or what? You'll buy me into submission?" I straightened my shoulders. "This is our grandmother's funeral, Derek. Show some class." I walked away before either of them could respond, but I could feel their eyes burning into my back. My hands were shaking, and not from grief. As I found a seat in the back row, I caught sight of my wife, Marta, near the front, deep in conversation with her sister, Victoria. Marta looked stunning as always, her dark hair pulled back in an elegant bun, wearing the black suit she'd bought for her promotion last month. The promotion that had supposedly saved our marriage by finally bringing in decent money. So why were we still broke? The service began, and I tried to focus on the pastor's words about Grandma's long life and generous spirit. But my mind kept wandering to Rebecca's whispered cruelty and the specific amount she'd mentioned, $37.30. That was exactly what was in our checking account as of yesterday morning. How did Derek know that? After the service, people milled around, sharing memories and condolences. I was standing by the guest book when I overheard Victoria talking to someone I didn't recognize. "Poor Alex," Victoria was saying, her voice carrying that fake sympathy she'd perfected. Marta's been working so hard to keep them afloat. She's practically living at the office these days, staying late with her business partner Greg to land new clients." Greg Fallon. I knew the name. Marta had mentioned him plenty of times, her partner at the advertising agency where she'd recently been promoted to head of creative. According to Marta, Greg was brilliant, charming, and the key to her career advancement. "It's so noble of her," Victoria continued, "sacrificing so much for her family." Something in her tone made my skin crawl. It was the way she said sacrificing, like she was sharing a private joke. I moved closer, pretending to study the flower arrangements. "Of course, all those late nights and weekend strategy sessions must be exhausting," the other woman said. Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, I'm sure they find ways to keep their energy up. Greg's got that cabin up at Lake Minnetonka, very private, very inspiring for creative work." The pieces started clicking together in my mind like a combination lock opening. The late nights, the mysterious improvements in our finances that never quite materialized in our bank account, the new clothes Marta had been buying, the way she'd been distant, distracted. I felt like I was going to be sick. Alex? Marta appeared beside me, her hand touching my arm. Are you okay? You look pale. I looked at my wife of 15 years, the mother of my 2 children, and realized I was looking at a stranger. I'm fine, I said. I'm just tired. She studied my face with those dark eyes that had once made me feel like the luckiest man alive. Now they just look calculating. We should probably head home soon, she said. I've got an early meeting tomorrow with Greg about the Morrison account. Of course you do. If she caught the edge in my voice, she didn't show it. Victoria's having people over next weekend. We should go. Will Greg be there? The question seemed to catch her off guard. Probably. Why? Just curious. I'd like to meet this business partner you spend so much time with. Something flickered across her face. Fear? Guilt? It was gone too quickly for me to be sure. Sure, she said. I'm sure you two would get along great. I doubted that very much. As we drove home in our 10-year-old Honda, I stared out the window and tried to process everything I'd learned. My wife was having an affair. My cousin knew details about our finances that he shouldn't have access to, and I was apparently the last person in my family to figure any of this out. But here's the thing about being underestimated your whole life. People forget that quiet doesn't mean stupid, and poor doesn't mean powerless. I had 2 advantages Derek and Greg didn't know about. First, I'd spent the last 5 years as an insurance investigator, which meant I knew how to find information people didn't want found. Second, I had absolutely nothing left to lose. By the time we pulled into our driveway, I'd made a decision. If my wife wanted to play games, I'd show her how a real investigator plays. The house felt different as we walked in. Ross and Amelia were both away at college, so it was just Marta and me rattling around in rooms that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. Marta immediately went upstairs to change, claiming she had work to catch up on. I poured myself a drink and sat in my father's old recliner thinking. After about an hour, Marta came back downstairs wearing jeans and a sweater that looked expensive. I'm going to run to the office for a few hours, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Greg wants to review the Morrison presentation before tomorrow. On a Sunday night? You know how important this account is. She grabbed her keys from the counter. Don't wait up. After she left, I went upstairs to our bedroom. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I figured I'd know it when I found it. I started with her dresser, then moved to her side of the closet. That's when I found it. Tucked behind a jewelry box I'd given her for our 10th anniversary was a small silver lighter, expensive, engraved with the initials GF in elegant script. Greg Fallon. I held the lighter up to the light, turning it over in my hands. It was heavy, real silver, the kind of gift a man gives to a woman he's sleeping with. The kind of gift I could never afford to give my own wife. I slipped the lighter into my pocket and smiled for the first time since the funeral. Game on. Monday morning came with the kind of gray drizzle that makes everything look like a crime scene. I sat in my cubicle at Hartwell Insurance, staring at claim forms and thinking about silver lighters. My boss, Janet Morrison, had been droning on about quarterly numbers for the past 20 minutes, but my mind was elsewhere. Rourke, you with us? I looked up to find Janet's sharp blue eyes fixed on me. Sorry, just thinking about the Patterson case. Good, because I'm assigning you something new. She dropped a thick file on my desk. Suspected insurance fraud. Big money involved. Think you can handle it? I almost laughed. If she only knew what kind of investigation I was really planning. Absolutely. After Janet left, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for, Louise Chen. We'd gone to college together, and she'd become a private investigator after a stint with the Minneapolis Police Department. More importantly, she owed me a favor from when I'd helped her prove her ex-husband was hiding assets during their divorce. Alex Rourke. Louise's voice was warm with surprise when she answered. To what do I owe the pleasure? I need your help with something. Can we meet for coffee? This sounds serious. Everything okay? Define okay. There was a pause. Caribou on Grand Avenue, 1 hour. Louise was already waiting when I arrived, her black hair pulled back in its usual no-nonsense ponytail. She wore jeans and a leather jacket, looking like she could handle whatever trouble came her way, which, knowing Louise, she probably could. You look like heck, she said by way of greeting. Thanks. You always know just what to say. I slid into the booth across from her. Seriously, Alex, what's going on? You sounded weird on the phone. I told her everything. The funeral, Rebecca's comment about our finances, Victoria's conversation about Marta and Greg, the lighter. Louise listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. Son of a witch, she said when I finished. How long do you think it's been going on? I don't know, maybe 6 months. That's when she got the promotion and started working late. Louise pulled out a small notebook and pen. Tell me about this Greg Fallon. Mid-40s, owns half of Bold Creative Marketing, drives a restored 19-month Mustang. Marta mentioned it because she thought it was cool. Lives in some fancy condo downtown. And the cabin Victoria mentioned? Lake Minnetonka, that's all I heard. Louise scribbled notes. I can find the property records, get an address. What exactly do you want from me, Alex? That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? I want proof, I said finally. Real proof, not just suspicions and overheard conversations, and then I want to destroy them both. Louise looked at me for a long moment. That's not the Alex Rourke I went to college with. The Alex Rourke you went to college with was an idiot who thought being nice and working hard would be enough. Turns out the world doesn't work that way. She closed her notebook. Okay, but we do this smart and legal. I won't help you do anything that could land you in jail. Agreed. My rate is $500 a day plus expenses. I winced. I don't exactly have $500 lying around. Then you'll owe me. Consider it an investment in justice. She stood up. I'll start with basic surveillance. See where they go when they go there. Should have something for you by the end of the week. After Louise left, I drove back to the office but couldn't concentrate on work. Instead, I found myself researching Greg Fallon online. His company's website featured plenty of photos of him. Tall, silver-haired, wearing expensive suits and confident smiles. In one photo, he stood next to his Mustang at some charity event, looking like he owned the world. The car was beautiful, I had to admit. Cherry red with white racing stripes, probably worth more than I made in 2 years. According to the caption, it had been featured in Classic Car magazine. I studied the photo for a long time, memorizing details. The license plate, the parking garage, where the event had been held, the way Greg stood with one hand possessively on the hood. By Wednesday, I was climbing the walls. Marta had worked late every night, coming home after 11 with stories about client dinners and strategy sessions. She seemed distracted, distant, like she was living in a different world than the rest of us. Thursday morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Louise. Got something. Meet me at the usual place. 6 p.m. I spent the rest of the day watching the clock, my mind racing with possibilities. When I finally made it to Caribou, Louise was waiting with a manila envelope and a grim expression. Well? I asked, sliding into the booth. She opened the envelope and spread out a series of photographs. Tuesday night, followed your wife from her office to the Marriott downtown. She met Greg in the bar, they had dinner, and then... She pointed to a photo of Marta and Greg entering an elevator together. Room 1247. She didn't come out until the next morning. I stared at the photos, feeling something cold and hard settling in my chest. Seeing the proof was different from suspecting. This made it real. There's more, Louise said, pulling out another set of photos. Yesterday I followed them to the lake cabin. It's registered under Greg's company name, very secluded. They spent the afternoon there. The photos showed Marta and Greg on a deck overlooking the water, laughing, touching, looking like lovers on vacation. In one shot, Greg had his arms around Marta from behind, his face buried in her neck. How long? I asked. Based on what I observed, this is a well-established routine. They're comfortable together, familiar. I'd guess at least 6 months, probably longer. I gathered up the photos and put them back in the envelope. What do I owe you? Nothing yet. This was just reconnaissance. What do you want to do next? I thought about Rebecca's smug smile at the funeral, about Derek's condescending attitude, about 15 years of marriage reduced to secret hotel rooms and afternoon cabin visits. I want to hurt them, I said quietly. Both of them. I want them to feel what I felt when I found out. Louise leaned back in her chair. Okay, but remember what I said about keeping it legal. Don't worry, I've got some ideas. That night, Marta came home at her usual late hour, full of apologies and explanations about client emergencies. I listened to her lies with a smile, nodding in all the right places, playing the part of the understanding husband. But inside, I was planning. Friday morning, I called in sick to work and drove downtown to Greg's building. The Mustang was parked in its reserved spot in the underground garage, gleaming under the fluorescent lights like a red jewel. I'd brought a small toolkit from home. Nothing fancy, just basic tools any homeowner might have. I knelt beside the car and quickly loosened the valve stems on all 4 tires, letting the air out slowly so it wouldn't make noise. Then I took the silver lighter from my pocket and placed it on the hood with a note I'd written on insurance company letterhead. "Let's see how fast you run on flats. A concerned observer." The whole operation took less than 5 minutes. I was back in my Honda and driving away before anyone could spot me. But as I pulled out of the garage, I saw Greg emerge from the elevator, coffee in hand, checking his phone. I slowed down just enough to watch through my rearview mirror as he discovered his deflated tires and found the lighter. Even from a distance, I could see his face go pale. He looked around frantically, as if expecting to see someone watching him. Then he pulled out his phone and made what looked like a very urgent call. Probably to Marta. I drove home with a smile on my face for the first time in weeks. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Greg Fallon was about to learn that some people bite back when cornered, and I was just getting started. That evening, Marta came home in a state I'd never seen before. Her usual composed demeanor was cracked, and she kept checking her phone every few minutes. "Everything okay?" I asked, settling into my recliner with a beer and the evening news. "Fine," she said quickly, just some trouble with a client. "Anything I can help with?" She looked at me sharply as if trying to determine whether I was being genuine or sarcastic. "No, it's nothing. Greg's handling it. Good old Greg. What would you do without him?" This time there was no mistaking the suspicion in her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" I shrugged, taking a sip of my beer. "Nothing. Just seems like he's become pretty important to your work." She stared at me for another moment, then went upstairs without another word. I heard her talking on the phone in low, urgent tones, but I couldn't make out the words. Saturday morning, Louise called with an update. "Your boy Greg filed a police report about the tire incident," she said. "Claimed it was vandalism, but without security footage or witnesses, there's not much they can do." Security footage? Check that already. The garage camera was conveniently malfunctioning that day. Amazing how these things happen. I grinned. Louise was worth every penny I didn't have. "What's next?" she asked. "I'm working on something. Give me a few days." "Alex, be careful. If Greg's smart, he'll be watching for more trouble." "Don't worry. I'm not done being careful yet." But I wasn't done being reckless either. Sunday afternoon, Marta announced she was going shopping with Victoria. I waited 30 minutes after she left, then drove to Greg's building. This time, I wasn't targeting his car. I'd done my research on bold creative marketing. They occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, and according to their website, they were hosting a client presentation Monday morning for the Morrison account, the same account Marta had been supposedly working so hard on. I'd also done research on the building itself. Like many downtown office buildings, it employed a cleaning service that worked nights and weekends. And like many middle-aged men in cheap suits, I could blend in almost anywhere if I acted like I belonged. I'd bought a gray maintenance uniform at a thrift store and a clipboard at an office supply store. Add a confident stride and an annoyed expression, and I was invisible. The building's weekend security was minimal. One guard at the front desk who barely looked up when I flashed a fake ID and muttered something about emergency HVAC repair. The elevator took me to the 15th floor, where Bold Creative's glass doors were locked but not alarmed. Getting inside was easier than it should have been. The lock was standard office building quality, and I'd learned a few things about locks during my insurance investigation career. Sometimes you have to get into places where people don't want you to be. The office was exactly what I'd expected, all glass and chrome and modern art, designed to impress clients with money. Greg's office was in the corner with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Mississippi River. I found what I was looking for in his desk drawer, a small digital recorder, probably used for dictating notes. But I had a different use in mind. I'd spent the previous evening editing together audio clips from various sources, snippets of conversation I'd recorded during family dinners when Marta was on the phone with Greg, mixed with generic romantic audio I downloaded from the internet. Nothing explicit, nothing that could be traced back to me, but enough to sound like intimate conversation between lovers. I connected the recorder to Greg's computer and uploaded the audio file, then set it to play during Monday morning's presentation. The timing would be perfect, right when Greg was trying to impress the Morrison account with his professionalism and expertise. As I worked, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I quickly finished the upload and ducked under Greg's desk just as someone walked past the office. Security guard making rounds, probably. I waited 5 minutes, then slipped out the way I'd come. The whole operation took less than 20 minutes. Monday morning, I called in sick again and spent the day imagining what was happening at Bold Creative. Around noon, my phone rang. "Alex?" Marta's voice was strained. "Can you come pick me up? Where are you?" "Downtown, my car won't start." "What about Greg? Can't he give you a ride?" There was a long pause. "Greg's not available right now." I found Marta standing outside her office building, looking like she'd aged 5 years since morning. She got in the car without speaking, staring out the window as we drove home. "How was the Morrison presentation?" I asked casually. "It was canceled." "Oh? Why?" Another long pause. "Technical difficulties." That evening, Louise called with details. "Your audio trick worked perfectly," she said. "According to my contact in the building, the presentation was going smoothly until romantic music and what sounded like intimate conversation started playing through the conference room speakers. Greg couldn't figure out how to stop it. The clients walked out and there was a huge scene." "What kind of scene?" "Apparently, Greg accused several people of sabotage, including your wife. She denied it. They had a screaming match in front of the remaining clients, and security had to escort Greg out of his own building." I felt a warm glow of satisfaction. "What about Marta?" "She left right after, looked pretty shaken up, according to my source." "Good. Alex, I'm getting worried about you. This is starting to feel personal." "It is personal, Louise. They made it personal when they decided to humiliate me. Just remember what I said about keeping it legal. Don't worry, I'm not breaking any laws. Not technically, anyway." Tuesday morning, Marta didn't go to work. She spent the day making phone calls and pacing around the house like a caged animal. When I came home from the office, I found her sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and a stack of papers. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" "About us, about our marriage." I sat down across from her, trying to look concerned rather than curious. "What's wrong?" "I think—" She struggled with the words. "I think someone's trying to cause trouble for me at work." "What kind of trouble?" "Someone's been sabotaging my projects, making me look bad in front of clients, and now they're targeting Greg too. Why would anyone do that?" She looked at me directly for the first time in weeks. "I don't know. But Alex, if someone's trying to hurt me professionally, it could affect our whole family. My income, our future." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we should consider a separation. Just temporarily, until I can figure out what's going on." I let the words hang in the air for a moment, watching her face. She was scared, I realized. Not just worried about her career, but genuinely frightened. "A separation," I repeated. "Just for a few months. Maybe I could stay with Victoria, and you could have the house. And Greg? Where does he fit into all this?" Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the silver lighter, placing it on the table between us. "I found this in our bedroom, Marta. Care to explain?" She stared at the lighter like it was a snake. I don't know what that is." "It's engraved with Greg Fallon's initials. Maybe he dropped it at the office, and I accidentally picked it up." "In our bedroom?" She stood up abruptly, knocking over her wine glass. Red liquid spread across the table like a dark stain. "I don't have to explain anything to you," she said. "If you're going to start making accusations—" "I'm not making accusations. I'm asking questions. There's a difference." She grabbed her purse and keys. "I'm going to Victoria's. We can discuss this when you're ready to be reasonable." After she left, I cleaned up the spilled wine and sat in the growing darkness, thinking. The separation wasn't unexpected. It was probably part of their plan all along. Get rid of the inconvenient husband, split the assets, start fresh with the new boyfriend. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I picked up my phone and called Louise. "I need you to find out everything you can about Greg Fallon's finances," I said. "Bank accounts, investments, property holdings, everything. That's going to take some serious digging, and it won't be cheap. I don't care what it costs. I want to know where every penny comes from and where it goes." "Alex, what are you planning?" I looked at the silver lighter still sitting on the table where I'd left it. "I'm planning to give them exactly what they deserve." The house felt different without Marta. Quieter, but also cleaner somehow, like an infection had been removed. I spent Wednesday evening going through her belongings more thoroughly, looking for anything else she might have left behind. In her jewelry box, I found receipts for expensive dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together. In her closet, I discovered clothes with tags still on them, designer pieces that cost more than my monthly salary. And in her car, which she'd left in the garage when she went to Victoria's, I found something that made my blood run cold. A pregnancy test. Negative, thank God, but recent. I sat in the driver's seat of her Honda, holding the test and trying to process what it meant. Had she been trying to get pregnant with Greg? Or had there been a scare that made them more careful? Either way, it was another piece of evidence that this affair was serious, long-term, and completely devastating to everything I'd thought my life was. Thursday morning, Louise called with preliminary results from her financial investigation. Greg Fallon is not as wealthy as he appears, she said. The condo is mortgaged to the hilt, the Mustang has a lien against it, and Bold Creative Marketing is carrying significant debt. What kind of debt? The kind that suggests they're living beyond their means. Fancy office, expensive equipment, big client entertainment budget, but not enough revenue to support it all. So where's the money coming from? That's what I'm trying to figure out. But Alex, there's something else. I did some checking on your wife's finances too. My stomach tightened. And? She's been moving money around. Small amounts, but consistently. Transferring funds from your joint account to a personal account you don't have access to. How much? Over the past 6 months? About $15,000? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. $15,000 was more than we had, which meant she'd been taking money from our savings, our emergency fund, probably even our kids' college accounts. There's more, Louise continued. The personal account has been making regular payments to something called LM Property Management. What's that? Still working on it, but I think it might be connected to the lake cabin. After Louise hung up, I sat in my cubicle at work, staring at insurance forms and thinking about betrayal. It wasn't just the affair anymore. Marta had been systematically looting our family's finances to support her new life with Greg. That afternoon, I decided to take a more direct approach. I drove to Victoria's apartment complex, an upscale development in Edina, where the rent probably cost more than my mortgage. Marta's car was in the parking lot, confirming she was staying there. I didn't go up to the apartment. Instead, I waited across the street in a coffee shop with a clear view of the building entrance. Around 5:30, Marta emerged wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Black, elegant, expensive. She got in her car and drove toward downtown. I followed at a distance, using techniques I'd learned during insurance surveillance. She parked in the lot behind an upscale restaurant called Zello, the kind of place that required reservations and charged $30 for an entree. Through the restaurant's windows, I could see her sitting at a corner table with Greg. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car, and they were holding hands across the table like teenagers in love. I watched them for an hour, taking photos with my phone and fighting the urge to march inside and confront them. But that would have been emotional, impulsive. I was past that now. Instead, I waited until they finished dinner and walked to Greg's Mustang. They were so absorbed in each other that they never noticed me following them out of the parking lot. They drove to the lake cabin. I'd looked up the address Louise had found, a secluded property on Lake Minnetonka, accessible only by a winding private road through heavy woods. I parked a quarter-mile away and walked through the trees until I could see the cabin. It was bigger than I'd expected, more like a luxury vacation home than a simple cabin. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the lake, and a deck wrapped around the entire structure. Greg's Mustang was parked in front, next to a BMW I didn't recognize. Through the windows, I could see Marta and Greg moving around inside, comfortable and familiar. This wasn't a new relationship or a casual affair. They were living like a couple, like they belonged together. I spent 2 hours watching them, memorizing the layout of the property, noting security measures, there weren't any, and planning my next move. When they finally went upstairs together, I slipped closer to the house. The deck was accessible from the woods, and they'd left several windows open to let in the cool evening air. I could hear their voices clearly, laughing, talking about their future together, making plans that didn't include me or my children. Once the divorce is final, Greg was saying, we can make this official, move in together, maybe even get married. What about the money situation? Marta's voice carried a note of concern. Don't worry about that. I've got some deals in the works that will solve our cash flow problems. And once Alex is out of the picture, you'll have half of everything anyway. It's not much. The house has some equity, but his salary will make it work. Besides, you're worth more than money. I'd heard enough. I crept back to my car and drove home, my mind racing with possibilities. Friday morning, I called in sick again and spent the day researching LM Property Management. It turned out to be a shell company owned by Greg's business partner, Jake Turnbull. And according to public records, LM Property Management owned not just the lake cabin, but several other expensive properties around the Twin Cities. I was starting to see the bigger picture. Greg and Jake were running some kind of real estate scam, using bold creative marketing as a front, and my wife's stolen money as operating capital. That evening, I drove back to the lake cabin. This time, I came prepared. I'd stopped at a hardware store and bought a few items. Nothing illegal, nothing that couldn't be explained as legitimate home maintenance supplies. But in the right hands, they could cause considerable inconvenience. The cabin was dark when I arrived, Greg's Mustang nowhere to be seen. I approached carefully, making sure the property was truly empty before I went to work. First, I located the main water shutoff valve and closed it, then opened all the faucets inside the house to drain the pipes. In Minnesota, even in late spring, nighttime temperatures could drop low enough to cause problems for a house without heat and water. Next, I found the electrical panel and flipped the main breaker, cutting power to the entire house. The refrigerator would warm up, the security system would go offline, and any electronic devices would lose power. Finally, I used a small drill to put tiny holes in the screens of several windows, not enough to be immediately obvious, but enough to let in mosquitoes and other insects when the weather warmed up. The whole operation took less than 30 minutes, and when I was done, the cabin looked exactly the same from the outside. But the next time Greg and Marta came for a romantic getaway, they'd find their love nest considerably less comfortable. As I drove home, I felt a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. It was the satisfaction of taking action instead of just accepting whatever life threw at me. But I was just getting started. Saturday morning, my phone rang. It was Marta. "Alex, we need to talk." "About what?" "About the divorce. I think we should make this official." "I see. And what exactly are you proposing?" "I want to keep this amicable. Split everything 50-50, joint custody of the kids when they're home from college, no lawyers if we can help it." I almost laughed. She wanted to steal our money, destroy our family, and then have an amicable divorce. "That sounds reasonable," I said. "When do you want to discuss details?" "How about tomorrow? We could meet somewhere neutral." "Sure. How about that new place on Lake Minnetonka? I hear it's very private." There was a pause. "What place?" "Oh, I'm sure you know the one I mean. Very secluded, great for intimate conversations." Another pause, longer this time. "Alex, what are you trying to say?" "I'm not trying to say anything, Marta. I'm saying it. I know about Greg, I know about the cabin, and I know about the money you've been stealing from our accounts." The silence stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. "How long have you known?" she finally asked. "Long enough. What do you want?" It was a good question. What did I want? Money? An apology? My old life back? "I want justice," I said finally. "I want you and Greg to pay for what you've done to me and our family." "Alex, please. Let's just handle this like adults." "Adults don't steal from their families to fund affairs with their business partners. It's not like that." "Then tell me what it's like." But she'd already hung up. I spent the rest of the weekend planning my next move. The cabin sabotage had been satisfying but small scale. I needed something bigger, something that would really hurt both of them, where they were most vulnerable. Their reputations. Monday morning, I called Louise with a new assignment. "I need you to find out everything you can about Bold Creative Marketing's client list," I said. "Particularly the Morrison account, and any other big clients they're trying to land. What are you planning?" "I'm planning to give Greg Fallon a lesson in consequences." "Alex, I'm starting to worry about you. This is getting pretty intense. They made it intense when they decided to destroy my life. Just promise me you won't do anything that can't be undone." I thought about that for a moment. The truth was, some things couldn't be undone. My marriage was over, my trust was shattered, and my life as I'd known it was finished. But that didn't mean I had to go down quietly. "I promise," I said, "that everything I do will be exactly what they deserve." Tuesday morning brought news that changed everything. Louise called with information that made my blood run cold and my heart race with possibility. "I found something big," she said. Greg and Jake aren't just running a real estate scam, they're embezzling money from their clients. What kind of money? Advertising budgets. Clients give them money to buy media placements, TV ads, radio spots, online campaigns. But instead of spending the full amount on advertising, they're skimming 30 to 40% and using shell companies to hide the theft. I felt a surge of adrenaline. How much money are we talking about? Based on what I can piece together from public records and financial filings, probably close to $2 million over the past 3 years. Jesus. It gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. The Morrison account your wife has been working so hard on? It's not just any client. Morrison Industries is owned by Robert Morrison, who sits on the Minneapolis City Council and has connections throughout state government. So if Morrison finds out Bold Creative has been stealing from clients, it won't just be a civil matter. This is the kind of fraud that brings federal investigators, and Morrison has the political connections to make sure they take it seriously. I leaned back in my chair, mind racing. This was bigger than I'd imagined. Greg and Marta weren't just having an affair, they were involved in major financial crimes. Louise, I need you to document everything you've found. Every transaction, every shell company, every piece of evidence. Alex, what are you planning to do with this information? I'm planning to give Robert Morrison exactly what he needs to destroy them both. That's serious, Alex. We're talking about federal charges, prison time. They should have thought about that before they decided to steal from their clients and my family. Are you sure about this? Once you cross this line, there's no going back. I thought about Marta's lies, Greg's arrogance, the $15,000 stolen from our accounts, the pregnancy test in the car. I'm sure. Wednesday afternoon, I put my plan into motion. I'd spent the morning researching Robert Morrison and his company. Morrison Industries was a family-owned construction firm that had been in business for 40 years, with an impeccable reputation and strong ties to the community. According to their website, they were currently bidding on a major city contract to renovate the downtown convention center, the kind of high-profile project that could make or break a company's future. I called Morrison Industries and asked to speak with Robert Morrison directly. This is regarding your advertising account with Bold Creative Marketing, I told his secretary. I have information Mr. Morrison needs to hear. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Morrison's office, a modest space that reflected the man himself. Successful but unpretentious, more concerned with substance than style. Robert Morrison was in his 60s with gray hair and the kind of weathered hands that suggested he'd worked construction before becoming an executive. He listened carefully as I explained who I was and why I was there. You're saying your wife and her business partner have been stealing from their clients? He asked when I finished. I'm saying you should look very carefully at how your advertising budget has been spent over the past year. I handed him a folder containing copies of everything Louise had found. Financial records, shell company filings, bank transfers, and a detailed timeline of suspicious transactions. Morrison spent 15 minutes reviewing the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. If this is accurate, he said finally, Bold Creative owes my company approximately $300,000. That's just your account. Based on what we found, they've been doing this to multiple clients. Why are you bringing this to me? What do you get out of it? It was a fair question. My wife has been having an affair with Greg Fallon and stealing money from our family accounts to support their lifestyle. I want them to face consequences for what they've done. Morrison studied my face for a long moment. This isn't just about money for you, is it? No, it's not. What exactly are you hoping will happen? I'm hoping you'll demand a full audit of your account and contact the appropriate authorities when you discover how much money has been stolen. Morrison leaned back in his chair. Mr. Rourke, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, but I have to ask, is any of this information obtained illegally? Everything in that folder comes from public records or legitimate financial investigations. Nothing was hacked, stolen, or obtained through illegal surveillance. And you're prepared to testify to that if necessary? Absolutely. Morrison closed the folder and stood up. I'll have my accountants review our records immediately. If what you're suggesting is true, Bold Creative Marketing is finished. What about Greg and my wife? If they've committed crimes, they'll be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I left Morrison's office feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt like I was in control instead of just reacting to events. Thursday morning, the hammer fell. Louise called me at work with updates. Morrison's accountants worked through the night. They found evidence of systematic theft going back 2 years. Morrison has already contacted the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. What about Greg and Marta? Bold Creative's offices were raided this morning. Greg was arrested at his condo, and they're looking for your wife. I felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with something that might have been guilt. Where is she? Unknown. She's not at Victoria's apartment, and her car hasn't been spotted. What charges are they facing? Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, probably more. We're talking about serious federal crimes with mandatory minimum sentences. I hung up and sat in my cubicle, trying to process what I'd set in motion. Within a week, I'd gone from being the ignorant, betrayed husband to the man who'd destroyed his wife's life and freedom. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the lake cabin. Come alone, M. I stared at the message for a long time. Going to meet Marta alone was probably stupid and potentially dangerous. She had to know I was responsible for what had happened, and desperate people did desperate things. But I needed to see her face when she realized how completely she'd underestimated me. I drove to Lake Minnetonka as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded me of fire. The cabin looked different in the fading light. Smaller, shabbier, like a stage set after the play was over. Marta's car was parked in front, and I could see her silhouette through the windows. She was sitting at the kitchen table, motionless, like she was waiting for something. I approached the front door carefully, unsure what to expect. When I knocked, her voice called out, "It's open!" She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes were red from crying. The confident, polished woman I'd been married to for 15 years was gone, replaced by someone who looked broken and desperate. "Hello, Marta." "You did this." It wasn't a question. "You did this. I just made sure there were consequences." She laughed, a bitter sound that had no humor in it. "Consequences. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've done exactly what you deserved. Greg's in federal custody. They're saying he could get 20 years. Good. And me? What about me, Alex? What did I deserve?" I looked at her sitting in the cabin where she'd planned her new life, surrounded by the ruins of her dreams. "You deserve to learn that actions have consequences. You deserve to discover that betraying people has a price. And you deserve to find out what it feels like to lose everything that matters to you. I never meant for it to happen this way. You never meant to get caught." She was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. What happens to our kids? What happens to Ross and Amelia when they find out their mother is going to prison? For the first time since this began, I felt a flicker of doubt. Our children would be devastated by what was about to happen. They'd lose their mother, probably for years. But then I remembered the pregnancy test, the stolen money, the lies and betrayal and casual cruelty. "They'll learn that their father isn't the weak, pathetic man everyone thought he was," I said. "They'll learn that sometimes the underdog wins." Marta looked up at me with something like fear in her eyes. "Who are you? This isn't the man I married." "You're right. The man you married was naive enough to trust you, stupid enough to believe your lies, weak enough to let people walk all over him." I moved closer and she shrank back in her chair. "But that man is gone, Marta. You ended him when you decided I wasn't worth your loyalty. And what's left is someone who learned a very important lesson about how the world really works." "What lesson?" "That nice guys finish last, but smart guys who pretend to be nice can finish first." I turned and walked toward the door. "Alex, wait." Her voice was desperate now. "What if I testify against Greg? What if I cooperate with the FBI and help them recover the money? Maybe we could work something out." I stopped and looked back at her. "You still don't get it, do you?" "Get what?" "This isn't about the money, Marta. This isn't about Greg or the affair or even the lies." "Then what is it about?" "It's about the fact that you looked at me and decided I was worth nothing. It's about 15 years of marriage that you threw away for a man with a fancy car and expensive suits. It's about the fact that you never even considered that I might be smart enough to figure out what you were doing." I opened the door and stepped outside. "Alex, please." "Goodbye, Marta. Enjoy explaining to Ross and Amelia how you threw away their college funds for afternoon love at a lake cabin." I drove home through the darkness, feeling something I hadn't felt since this whole thing began. Peace. The house was quiet when I arrived, but it wasn't the oppressive silence of loneliness. It was the calm silence of a storm that had finally passed. I poured myself a drink and sat in my father's old recliner, thinking about the past week and what it had cost me. My marriage was over, my wife was probably going to prison, and my children would have to live with the shame of what their mother had done. But I was still here, still standing, still breathing. And for the first time in years, I was proud of who I was. My phone rang. Louise. Alex, are you okay? I heard Marta was arrested at the lake cabin an hour after you left. I'm fine. The FBI wants to interview you tomorrow. They need your statement about how you discovered the financial irregularities. I'll be there. Alex, do you regret any of this? I thought about Rebecca's smug smile at the funeral, about Derek's condescending attitude, about Marta's lies and Greg's arrogance. No, I said, I don't regret any of it. What happens now? Now I start over. Build a new life. Maybe even find someone who appreciates what I have to offer. And if Marta gets convicted, then she'll have plenty of time to think about the choices she made. After Louise hung up, I sat in the darkness and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new possibilities. But tonight I was exactly where I belonged. In my own house, in my own chair, master of my own destiny. The underdog had won.